More than 320,000 Minnesotans served in the armed forces during World War II, and at least 22,000 people attended the dedication of Minnesota's World War II Memorial in June 2007. Paul Mandell tells us more. Minnesota's World War II Memorial takes a prominent spot here on the Capitol grounds, just south of the Capitol building and north of the Veterans Building. What was Minnesota looking for in the design of this memorial?
Well, we knew we wanted it here. By this time, the Vietnam had happened. The Vietnam Memorial had gone in, the Korean Memorial had gone in, and it ended up very much like in Washington, D.C., where on two sides of the National Mall, you have the two memorials, and then the D.C., the World War II Memorial, which had actually already been started for fundraising, was going to be center on the axes, with the Capitol, on the center, with the crossroads. So we chose the site originally, and then there were a number of different proposals in the design competition. This one was one of the local teams, URS and Stan Sears and Andrea Michaelbust, who were involved in the, was just the simplicity of it and the depth of the meaning. It was one of the clear winners.
And so we're standing here right next to the pit that goes into the ground. What is the symbolism of that?
That was, at the beginning of the war, the state of everyone's despair, depression, outlook that was very, very pessimistic, gloomy, and dark. And that's why it's all so rough. It purposely prevents you from even walking into it because it's really rough hewn.
Foreboding.
And very much. So that's why this was the counterbalance to the rise and the hill, where by the end they were all celebrating because good had triumphed, light was again visible, the end was visible, and so it was the counterbalance to the rise.
And it's a journey through time.
Correct.
From the darkness into the light. And
Correct.
Then in the center there's a map of Minnesota. Why put that there?
Well, the map is actually a remnant from the original Court of Honor. So it shows the 87 counties with the walls surrounding.
So part of the design was to incorporate this map that was
Correct.
already existed.
Correct.
Surrounding the granite pit and then the ensuing rays of hope are 10 glass panels in an elliptical shape telling a story. What story are they telling?
On the east side, you've got the Atlantic Ocean Theater, the Atlantic European Theater, if you will, and the Pacific Theater over here. And they're all about what Minnesotans' role was. So you have, for instance, you have Charles Lindbergh, not the aviator, but Charles Lindbergh, who raised the Iwo Jima flag. You have Harold Stassen, who left the governorship to go fight. And you have the stories of the Cuyuna mines supplying some of the steel. You have some of all the local folklore and some of the local people are quoted. And you have things like the USS Ward, which we have the cannon for, having sunk fired the first shot at Pearl Harbor. So it's all Minnesota stories of what happened in the war that Minnesotans, either back here or over abroad, played a role in.
This memorial is relatively abstract, I think, just because we have the hole in the ground and then it's rising. It makes sense if you think about it, but you have to think about it. So what have people said over the years about this memorial? Are they satisfied that it's conveying what it was meant to convey?
I don't get the interaction with people on a daily basis. The commissioner, the previous commissioner, Larry Shelato, was always talking about how he would look out his window here and he'd always see three generations. He'd see the son who hasn't been fighting yet, the dad who might have been in this war or maybe the Vietnam War, and then the grandpa. And so he'd see three generations and they're telling stories or they're conveying, yeah, this was what we went through and that's how it went, and it would be viewed as a success, I think, yeah. I
read that accounts of the dedication, there were 22,000 people who came. So it was meaningful.
This was the biggest, by far the biggest crowd, and I mean, it was packed from here all the way up to Martin Luther King and beyond. They had the big flag suspended right in front of the Capitol. They had the flyovers. The thing I remember the most, because the ceremonies were all taking place facing us here, with the backdrop of the Veterans Building. And people were standing on all these pedestals, and I was like, you know, the first test of whether these panels would take the abuse. The thing I remember the most was after the ceremony was over, I'm just walking around and observing, and on Martin Luther King Boulevard, which was closed to traffic, there was this one veteran all decked out with his uniform. He was in a wheelchair, he had his medals on, and there had been a bagpiper who had been part of the ceremony, and he's very ceremonially walking up, he's crossing Martin Luther King, and he sees this guy, and he, in full like left turn, right turn, walked over very reverently, started piping, and then knelt in front of the guy and piped him a whole song, and then saluted him afterwards. And it was just two people, not ceremonially, just that interchange, and it was such a beautiful moment.